price tag.
Hello, defenders of Etheria. Today we have our lovely AP Countess to show off. She is definitely really strong and one of my favorite AP heroes to use. Not to mention, because she's an AP hero, she's also rather cheap to build out. So without further ado, let's jump into it. The armor mods will be the typical armor mods for any non-self-buffing hero. Technically, the Countess does have a self-buff, but her self-buff doesn't affect her AP damage despite activating ability buff chip. We'll be going with ability chip, healthy AP and swap AP. I use snakeskin on chest, but you can use ability chip instead of snakeskin if you would like slightly more damage. You can also rock tenacity chip on all 4 pieces instead of ability chip, if that's the way you want to go with it, but it is not necessary. I opted for the more damage over the immunity to crowd control. This is completely optional, and I do highly recommend going the tenacity route. I only use my Countess for endgame as a roller killer, so I need all the damage I can get. As for the helmet shards, we'll be using Inspiration, Channel, and Fury Restoration. Inspiration will reduce the cooldown of your abilities, so you're able to use them more often. Channel and Fury Restoration helps a bit with ability mana regen, as you'll see tends to be a slight issue. Fury Restoration heavily relies on critical hits to restore mana. On the gloves, you'd want Critical Strike, Inferno, and Holy Empowerment. Critical Strike will help with Fury Restoration, and is just simply best in slot in mostly all situations anyway. Inferno increases the damage of your Flame Surge ability, and Holy Empowerment increases damage output when your healing ability, the 4 Keybind ability, is active. This is to not be mixed up with the shield shard that also is called Holy Fire. Our next piece of gear is the chest. We will want to use Mage Gambit, Heroic Charge, and Coup de Grace. Mage Gambit is an overall damage increaser along with Coup de Grace. Heroic Charge will give you more damage on your Valiant Charge ability. Our boots will contain the shards Wildfire, Speed Boost, and Bunny Hop. Bunny Hop and Speed Boost are just normal boot shards that every hero tends to use. Wildfire, on the other hand, is a Countess-specific boot shard that increases the duration of the Flame Trail on the Flame Surge ability. Lastly, our weapon and shield. Countess is one of 2 heroes that can wear a shield. Our shield cannot have mods on it, but our weapon has focused AP chip, Flame Eater, and Mini-Boss chip. Now, I personally put Mini-Boss on it as I use this to deal with endgame rollers. But on a typical setup, you'll want an oil chip in place of Mini-Boss. Focused AP is just an overall increase to damage. Flame Eater increases damage to ignited enemies, which if you're using oil chip, you'll instantly ignite something 100% of the time with your left click. But if you're not using oil chip, well, you can ignite by getting Melting Point to activate, which you'll see what that does in a second. You'll want this weapon to be light for the weight to activate that ignite for you. Now for the shards. Melting Point, Sundering Blow, and Serpent God's Fury will be the go-to. Melting Point has a % chance to ignite the enemy's armor with any form of fire damage from the Countess, making them take increased damage for 6 seconds. This will also drop Drakenlord's shield. Sundering Blow lowers the enemy resistance, and Serpent God's Fury lowers your ability. Cooldown per crit hit. The shield will have Flame Cloak and Block Power. Flame Cloak does a decent amount of extra damage. Block Power, well, that's just there to fill in a slot. The godly stat we'll be using across all pieces will be Critical Chance. This is because we need them crits to restore the mana, as I've already stated previously. The cool part of shields is that they act like another sword when it comes to godly stats, well, kinda. They can roll crit chance or any other godly stat you'll normally roll on a secondary weapon, despite it just being a shield. Our ring will be the ring of time to lower our cooldowns and make our damage a bit higher. The pet I use is the Dragolic, but you can use Genie Prince with Mana Swirl if you're still running into mana problems. Up to you and what you're using the hero for. When you're placing your Ascension points into your AP Countess, you'll want to max out Holy Fire heal first, then Fury damage. After that, you can split points between Flame Surge and Valiant Charge. Valiant Charge acts like a bit of a nuke, so if you're only looking to mainly use this ability, you can add all your points into it, but it all depends on how many available points you have. Once those two abilities are maxed out, then you can add points into health. This is all you'll really need for the AP Countess. Call to arms damage and hero damage are both only affected by your left clicks. This is why I wouldn't bother putting points into them until very last, as you are indeed an AP build. In utility, you'd want movement speed, ability mana, hero crit chance, and then hero crit damage. Crit chance will be more important than crit damage. As previously mentioned, it's for the mana restoration. Also, crit damage means nothing if you can't crit to begin with. AP Countess is pretty easy to handle and not difficult to play with. You just activate her heal ability. Activate then deactivate Call to Arms, only for the cooldowns. Flame Surge and finally Valiant Charge. Don't forget to throw in that Dragolic before the Flame Surge and the Valiant Nuke. You should be left clicking when available to maximize the DPS output along with igniting if you're using Oil Chip instead of Mini-Boss. Well, that was a fun AP build. I hope you learned a thing or two about the Countess. If you do decide to use oil over Mini-Boss Chip, just know the 25% increased damage from the Ignite do be stacking with the Ignite from Melting Point. Also, another thing, you probably noticed my shield didn't have crit chance as the Godly stat. Well, that's because I have unfortunately ran out of Godly Orbs, so we're gonna keep crit damage instead for now. Just trust me when I say crit chance be best. Last but not least, remember anime skin gives 10% increased damage to the heroes it is on as anime thighs save lives. Adios amigos.